let's talk about Brazil. I'm afraid I'm going to have I'm going to ram a massive black pill down your throat now. But then I've got a little dessert red pill at the end. I'm going to throw in a little bit in a pool at the end, and so I'm going to depress you and then cheer you up a bit. Now, the Brazil story, it's a story of three characters that I want to pick out. Obviously, there's a lot more people involved in that. For Western audiences, there's three main characters I want to talk about. This spiteful little goblin is the first one. This is Lula da Silva. Short chap, there he is, being dwarfed by a Chinaman and an Indian.
Impressive.
This horrible little goblin. I mean, I'm a journalist, so I have to remain impartial. But you know, this guy. Who is he? Well, he came up through basically being a strike leader.
Oh yeah.
So if you were trying to get something done in Brazil, you know, this guy would toddle up to your belt level and start organising a protest, get everything shut down. But you know, lefties like that sort of thing. And of course, he got into politics, and he actually rose all the way to president on the back of that. And his presidency was basically wall-to-wall corruption and scandals. I mean, I'll take you through some of the scandals. I'm just picking out the top ones here. The Mendesalo scandal. Basically, big monthly allowances were being paid in bribes to congressmen in exchange for support. So basically, his party relied on cash for votes to stay in power. The and sorry for my pronunciation on this stuff. The Petrobras. That was the car wash was what it got nicknamed over here. So basically, the executives at this company, they skimmed off billions through government contracts, and then funneled that back to people in his party, PT, including Lula personally. That was probably the biggest scandal. The triplex apartment case. He accepted a massive beachfront apartment in exchange for contracts. And it was this particular one, that led to his conviction and imprisonment in 2018. One of the most corrupt presidents in Brazilian history.
And that must be quite an achievement by itself.
Yeah, it is.
And given how much we know that the left hate convicted felons, I'm sure they were, you know...
Oh, funnily enough, it doesn't apply in this case.
Oh, right, okay.
Not with this spiteful little mutant. So he had a 12-year prison sentence imposed, banned from running, and that's when I went to introduce the second character in all of this, Bolsonaro. Somewhat different man, family man, as good people tend to be, father of 5. He served in the military as an artillery captain before going into politics. He rose through the ranks. He started off in He started off in Rio, and his whole thing, throughout his whole political campaign, was, and you can see why he's on a collision course with the other guy when I tell you this. His whole thing was anti-corruption, law and order, and nationalism.
Sounds like there was quite the mandate for it as well.
Well, yes, and
So more than one way is a bit of a head above Lula.
Yes, in many ways. In many ways, he was above her. And this guy was absolutely loved by Brazilians. In fact, I mean, you know what it's like in Swindon. There's a lot of Turkish barbers. None of them are Turkish, but you know what I mean. There's a lot of Turkish barbers.
Sure.
So when I get my hair cut, I mean, presumably there might be a white barber somewhere in Swindon, but I don't know where it is. But
There is.
Oh, is there? Okay.
I found one.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll direct you to it next time.
Well, I actually tend to walk to the other side of town because I found a Brazilian barber's, and I quite like going there because, I mean, most of the time, you know, obviously I don't want to talk all the bloody time, so I like to sit there in silence. But if I fancy a chat, I just happen to mention the name Bolsonaro, and the room lights up. I mean, they go wild for that man.
So Brazilian barbers are actually staffed by Brazilians?
Surprisingly, yes.
Shockingly.
Yes. Yeah, it's shocking. They love this man. And he was kind of seen, I mean, he was painted the most favourably in Western media as the Brazilian Trump. But actually, most of the mainstream media just called him a far-right fascist, blah, 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 blah. No, I mean, nothing he did was far-right or fascist, but, you know...
I remember the one time he scared Stephen Fry.
I didn't know that one.
No, there's a clip that goes around of him sometimes where he's talking with Stephen Fry, and he just makes one little gay joke, and then Stephen Fry's voiceover narration was something like, "It was the most frightening experience I'd ever had in my life." And Bolsonaro's just being really friendly and having a laugh with him, and Stephen Fry is quivering.
The power of this man. I mean, imagine living a life where that is the scariest moment in your life. That is interesting. So anyway, what do the left do to a popular leader who can't be corrupted? Well, they stab him, of course. That's what they do. Normally we can't show this kind of stuff on YouTube, but you can't actually see the stab wound there. That is the moment he is stabbed by a leftist while being out on the streets during the presidential campaign. Sometime later, he furnished us with this picture of the wound and where they opened him up to try and deal with it. That is something that he has been having to deal with for some time. Now, of course, what happens is he's an anti-corruption politician. He's a good man. Brazil has been through just unbelievable levels of corruption. So he wins. And then what happens? US aid suddenly decide that they are going to more than double the amount of money that they are sending to Brazil. Now, we all remember US aid. I mean, they've been shut down now.
I believe they're part of the State Department under Rubio now, aren't they?
Yeah. I think most of it is closed down now because it got closed down under Doge, but I'm sure there's elements that are still there. So this happened. Direct US government foreign assistance spending in Brazil underwent a massive surge in the year 2019 to 2023, coinciding with a precise time period of Bolsonaro's time in office. The sum of such State Departments and US aid funding funneled to Brazil's civil society organisations more than doubled from 32 million to 70 million in 2019 as Bolsonaro took office. And you actually get to see what that looks like on the chart. You know, aid to Brazil suddenly shoots up. Where did that money go? What was going on with that?
To nationalistic projects?
Well, one of the things it went into was an absolute boatload of electronic voting machines for the next election. Now, you may not remember this, but this was at the time that the US was suffering a massive chip shortage. In fact, Joe Biden signed the CHIPS Act, the semiconductor shortage, which was causing real problems all over the US. So it's a bit odd that the US pressured Taiwan and said that Brazilian micro processor imports have priority over ours so that they could get built out all of these electronic voting machines. Interesting. The other thing that a lot of that money went to was building a network for our third character in this story. This guy. And why didn't you play the video, Samson? Because this is a thing that he had done. He likes walking around in this cape like Darth Vader. Yeah. This is how this man likes to present himself, in his cape with a little wind machine.
It's a shop assistant from Hot Fuzz.
In all fairness, we do need to bring capes back.
You should be our side, though.
Of course, obviously.
Indeed.
He's the power behind the throne in Brazil.
Right.
Here's Mike Benz to do a bit of... because Mike Benz is good at this stuff. Let's listen to Mike Benz.
So, Brazil has this tyrant judge, de Moraes, right? This is the current war between Elon and this, the head of Brazil's censorship court. It's called the TSE. It's a subcourt of Brazil's Supreme Court, the STF. And so a lot of people see the actions of this one tyrant judge who basically has this ability to issue an edict, and then anything posted online becomes instantly criminal. Sitting parliamentarians in Brazil call the current president, Lula, a thief. And the judge says, you're not allowed to say that. The person faces a criminal judgment for demeaning the current president, going after journalists, going after politicians, going after ordinary civilians by any edict. But there's a whole censorship substructure to what de Moraes is involved in. There's advisory councils. There's a whole coterie of flaggers who propose the things to be flagged, who do then the narrative network mapping, who challenges the results of Brazil's 2022 election. Well, they need these outside institutions to create this whole narrative network map. These are U.S. funded and U.S. backed channel institutions who provide the entire substructure. It's a Brazilian spider, but the spider web was laid by the U.S. State Department, USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy. I can go through all the roles. And the fangs of it are star-spangled spangs. This is the U.S. the U.S. State Department trying to take out its political opposition in Brazil. They went to war with Bolsonaro. They called him Trump of the tropics. They're waging the same campaign against Bolsonaro that they did through their own intermediaries to take out Trump during his term, to censor him on the internet there, and that they're using to censor Trump today through their work with the EU. They're just doing that in Brazil to stop Bolsonaro.
So classic USAID, build the infrastructure, multiple, parts of the spider's web all at one time.
To fortify things.
To fortify an election. Meanwhile, daft judge here, he basically puts the Supreme Court in his pocket.
Right.
Anyone appointed goes through him. And they overturn the Lula conviction, that spiteful little goblin from the beginning. They overturn the conviction. And how they do it is on a technicality that they invent, which is to say that the court that did him in for corruption lacked jurisdiction.
Then how did they do him in for corruption in the first place, then?
They didn't address that.
Oh.
No, they just sidestepped that. We're not going to look at any of that. We're just going to say that the court didn't have jurisdiction, therefore he's out, therefore he can run for president. And therefore, and also they were pushing the electronic voting machines. Would you believe it that election took quite a while to process? After initially looking like a slam dunk for Bolsonaro, there were some irregularities in areas where this guy had the most control. And would you believe it, the rural regions from far off, they had extraordinary turnouts, and a lot of the late votes found in the voting machines were actually for Lula.
I would believe that.
Funny enough, so Lula won by something like, it was like 49.8% to 50.2%. It was something ridiculous like that. So he then goes off and does a whole bunch of other, things. Judicial overreach is a good one. So basically, he was blocking Bolsonaro and his supporters' social media accounts, aggressively enforcing misinformation. This is during the election campaign. He was banned from posting many things, as were his supporters. Lula's conviction was overturned on a technicality. Multiple legal investigations and rulings against Bolsonaro while he's trying to campaign. Lula faced none of those, obviously. The margin of error actually 50.9 to 49.1. And this was after lengthy delays and lots of questions about these voting machines. And interestingly, Western media absolutely went to bat for Lula. And anybody questioning the vote was anti-democratic. I think there might have even been a period on YouTube when it was against their terms of service to question the Brazilian election.
I think that was lumped in with a number of the elections that you weren't allowed to question. Probably still aren't.
No, I think they had taken that off now. You can even question the Joe Biden one.
Right.
Now that it's not relevant anymore. Yeah, it's great terms of service. So after this interesting election, Brazil erupted. A lot of people saw it for what it was, and we had what the West described as Brazil's Jan 6, where huge numbers of them gathered in the capital, and of course they did the same thing. Crackdowns, solitary confinement, all that kind of stuff. This is where, however, Bolsonaro did let himself down a bit, and this is the actual root of the downfall.
This is where the famous KFC picture comes from.
This. I'm going to show you the KFC picture. So he was in Florida at the time, and there were Brazilians, outside his house. They're begging him to act. There were millions on the streets in Rio begging him to act. Now, to be perfectly fair to the man, there were lots of ongoing health issues, so that's why he was in Florida getting treatment.
He did get stabbed, so
yeah, and it's never quite healed. There were complications with that, but the classic photo is of when the military were no doubt saying to him, "We can act, we can do something." He was pictured in KFC eating a KFC. He didn't cross the Rubicon.
No.
It was the baton was offered to him and he didn't take it. He was like, "No, I'm going to do it. Rule of law. Yeah, of course they cheated, but We have to maintain at least the appearance of democracy. But he could have done something. There was the popular will, there was the military support, but he didn't do it. Mm. The moment he was out of office and the election was over, the Supreme Court launched multiple more investigations. They launched investigations for abuse of political power, attack on democracy, plotting a coup, discussions with military officials, and I don't doubt that those conversations took place. But it would have been the military guys saying, "We're ready to act," and him saying no. That was probably the level of the conversation. So they barred him from office until 2030, and they've pursued claims of coup and conspiracy, and other generals have been targeted as well. And then remarkably, recently, after a major surgery to deal with the ongoing complications with his stomach wound, while he was in the ICU, he got served papers from the Supreme Court. And they waited for this moment, then they served these papers, and they did it with a minimum possible lead time of like 5 days or something before the trial was going to be held. That is even in Brazil, that is unprecedented that sort of thing has happened. So news out, that is in Portuguese, so let me translate for you. Former President Jair Bolsonaro was predictably convicted today in a perfectly constructed partial group of Supreme Court justices in a 4-1 vote, and is sentenced to 27 years and 3 months. And it's going to be in one of the worst prisons in Brazil, the place where people get murdered daily. That's where they're going to stick him. And yes, that evil judge, yes, he was on the panel.
Of course he was.
He picked a 5-man panel as a subset of the Supreme Court to hold this trial. And even though he picked the people who went on it, 2 of them couldn't bring themselves to do it. They abstained. One of them voted, because this trial was a sham. One of them voted against, but him and another guy voted for, and therefore 2-1. That's it. 27 years jail.
And clearly this was a show trial.
Absolute show trial. This is what total left-wing victory looks like. It's assassinations, it's corruptions, it's partisan courts, it's political jailings, and he's even got a bit of USAID, deep state involvement in there as well. This is what could have happened in the US. And in fact, we were close to this. They were trying to put Trump in jail. They tried to assassinate him. Brazil is simply the US on a slightly different timeline, except with the added thing that it's got a bit of US deep state involvement, which is why I was pleased to see that Marco Rubio has come out this morning to say, what is he saying? The political persecution by sanctioned human rights abuser, this Judge Morales, continues as he and others on the Brazilian Supreme Court have unjustly ruled to imprison former President Bolsonaro. The United States will respond accordingly to this witch hunt. Good.
Okay, yeah, good.
Now, it was the Biden administration, not the Trump administration, who did this to Bolsonaro in the first place. But to be fair, US, if you broke it, you need to fix this. I know that 90% of your effort needs to be on addressing domestic issues, especially at a time like this. But all the same, you have a big overseas part of your government, and you broke this. So it does need to be fixed. So, yeah, face of evil in Brazil. Now, having thoroughly depressed you with that, now's the time for the good news. And I still, honestly, can't quite believe this myself.
Okay.
Right. So in Nepal,
yes,
the Zoomers, well, so basically the government shut down social media.
Right.
And the Zoomers are like, we're not having this.
And this was a far-left government, from
Yes,
what I've read.
yes.
Yeah.
So the Zoomers, after they banned social medias, they overthrew the government, and then they had a vote on Discord for a new Prime Minister.
No cap.
And the Nepalese military have accepted the vote. I mean...
Based.
This whole story is completely insane.
It is.
And it makes me think that this might be why we don't get cracked down on as hard on social media as they otherwise could or clearly want to.
Yeah.
Because it is very clear at this point that it's been commented following the murder of Charlie Kirk that social media can and does act as a release valve for people's energy. And they see something like this, which proves that, oh God, if we get rid of the whole thing, people won't just be complaining, they'll start to go underground, meet in their local pubs and organise...
Well, that's why Starmer's trying to shut down the pubs as well.
Well,
Yeah.
Right, and if this isn't good enough, and I'm just tagging it on to the end of the segment because this was a bit too, and I wanted to cover Brazil, and it's a bit too soon.
Sure.
I'm sure somebody will pick up this mantle on Monday. If this isn't good enough, they've been tearing down the flag of Nepal on government buildings and replacing it with a flag from Japanese anime.
Yeah, that's One Piece right there. Is Nepal a particularly big fan of One Piece? So they must be. I did overhear in the office some conversation that apparently the government was also trying to do something to ban anime, presumably One Piece. So was this literally the thing that
that's why
stepped
the
over
riot
line?
started. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand neither Zoomers nor anime, so I can't comment on this.
Well, this is the thing that you were talking about with AA on his channel yesterday. What happens if you get rid of the release valve and then get rid of the circuses and bread is exceedingly hard to come by?
Well, yes, quite.
This.
But let me tell you my politics now, right? So obviously, down with the boomers. That's a given. Right, skip the Gen Xers, skip my generation, and honestly, we're fine with that because we always knew that we were going to get skipped over. That the boomers were hang on by for fingernails. The millennials, when they start going on about their BLM and environmentalism, just okay, millennial, just shut the door, right? Just millennials is no.
They're quite easy to deal
Thank
with.
you. What we want is the Zoomer revolution. I want the Zoomer revolution.
Well, Dan, your vote of confidence is overwhelming.
Yes.
We're grateful for it.
And when they come for me and they put me in the I'm still gonna be fine with it. I'm gonna be like that guy in Monty Python: The Life of Brian who's hanging on the wall going, "Oh, Zoomers, wonderful people. They only hung me the right way up last week, but you're wonderful people."
You're just in there dressed like an anime character.
Yes,
like, you know?
yes. Zoomers, make this happen.
Who are the men that pick for scraps amongst the ruins at the end of history? You should know, because you encounter them every day. Between the towering buildings of a fallen empire, we find the Fellahin, the historyless men, who know nothing of the turning of the cosmic wheel and find themselves outside of civilization itself. Cut loose from the great chain of being, they represent the loam into which our dying culture will return. That is, unless we choose to take up the burden once again. This Fellahin condition is the subject we explore in issue 4 of Islander magazine, on sale while stocks last and available worldwide at shop.loadseaters.com.